Good morning. I don't have any overheads. I got an opportunity to come up here and spend an hour with you, and I figured you're going to see some great overheads after my presentation from Mike Nazzi. He's going to give you all the facts and figures and the details. One of the things he's going to show you is that these EPA rules are not about the climate, and they're not about greenhouse gases, and they're not about global warming. It's a totalitarianism approach to forcing a renewable portfolio standard across this country with zero impact on climate. But Mike is going to tell you that story and show you why it not only should be a concern, it should actually make you fighting mad. I was born in eastern Ohio, about 40 miles west of Pittsburgh, and went to college in Pittsburgh, and so I'm a coal guy. Have been all my life. Everybody in my town either worked at a power plant or a steel mill or actually in a coal mine. So when you hear me for the next hour, don't take any comment from me as anything but someone who's absolutely concerned about the coal industry and our future. But I'll tell you, if anybody in this room, anybody in North Dakota is comfortable today with the miracle that's occurring in this region, I'm going to encourage you to think twice about that. Because I'm going to suggest to you that there are any number of concerns that are right below the surface for all of you today that could not only interrupt or slow down the miracle of North Dakota, but could just flat stop it. I'm not talking about just coal. I'm talking about the oil and gas industry. I'm talking about the ability to supply power to the people that live in this state. I'm talking about the fundamental economics of North Dakota. And the topic I'm here to talk about is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And I'm going to ask you to do one thing if you do anything today after I'm done. Don't ever say CCS again, ever. Carbon capture and storage has been around for 15 years, and it's a waste disposal model for CO2 because the community, the global community, has convinced everybody that CO2 is a poisonous gas waste that needs to be disposed of. And I'm going to suggest to you that it's not a waste. What it is a valuable commodity. And you're sitting on a boatload of it up here in terms of the lignite that's in the ground and the potential you have going forward. And if you get stuck in the paradigm of thinking about it as a waste, you're going to play defense, and you're going to be right where the EPA, the environmentalists, and everybody else wants you. You're going to be playing defense. It's not enough to complain about EPA regulations. It's not enough to bark at the moon. What's important is you got to go forward with a technology and a solution and a strategy and a vision for your state that's going to get that lignite used to solve all those challenges you've got in front of you. And there's a lot of them, isn't there? I come up here not very frequently. Last time I came was in January. Now you can tell I know Mike Jones pretty well, and he asked me to come up in January, and I came. It was minus 17, but I'm not telling you anything you don't know, okay? But it was worth it, and it's wonderful today, by the way. Thank you for the weather, Mike. But let me tell you something. What I learned in a very short period of time, in the next 10 years, you need 3 gigawatts of power. That's a lot of power in 10 years. I'm also here to tell you that there aren't enough windmills and solar panels and some natural gas combined cycle facilities to get you 3 gigawatts of power in 10 years. Ain't going to happen. So that's self-limiting there in itself. Unless you're able to get the lignite out of the ground and build those coal-fired power plants that are going to be an underpin the whole economic miracle of what's going on here in North Dakota. You need that coal out of the ground. But I'll also tell you, you're not going to get any power plant up here permitted unless you've got a CO2 solution. You can talk about critical, supercritical, ultra supercritical. You can dazzle yourself with productivity and efficiency conversations. You can talk about how advanced the technology is, and I'm here to tell you, unless you've got a CO2 solution, you're not going to get a permit. That's me talking, but I think it's also something that we need to be conscious about going forward in this country and around the world. CO2 is an issue. Now, I'm not going to have a debate with you about climate change. I'm not going to talk about whether it's a good debate or a bad debate. It's something that exists, but what I'm going to suggest to you is pivot on this. CO2 can be utilized to meet a lot of the needs that you have in your businesses up here right now, and it isn't about the EPA. It's not about carbon taxes. It's not about cap and trade. It's not about all that hoop-de-doo that people want you to think about. What you need to be thinking about is CO2 can be used in enhanced oil recovery because you've got another problem up here. And that problem is you're drilling like you've never drilled before. And it's a miracle. Light, sweet crude's flowing. It's recognized globally in terms of the implications of North Dakota and the whole global market. But I'm going to tell you, I don't believe you can drill fast enough to sustain your growth. You're right at the precipice of a cliff that you're not going to be able to drill your way out of if you want to keep growing. Today, primary recovery in the Bakken is pathetically 4%. Every well that gets drilled, you get 4% recovery. That's 300% worse than most places around the world. That's not transformative technology. That's pathetic. Now, I'm not suggesting it's the wrong thing to do. What I'm suggesting is it's not sustainable. If you want to keep growing, you can't get enough drill rigs up here fast enough to keep replacing the wells that have already been drilled that in 18 months have petered out, and all the other new wells that you want to drill, and all the other oil that you want to flow. I'm suggesting to you that it's impossible to continue to grow with the technology that's being used today. Can't happen. So there's another reason why CO2 for enhanced oil recovery isn't just something we ought to think about. It isn't something that is the reason why we're never going to say CCS again, because we have to say CCUS. We don't choose to do it, we're compelled to do it. Because that CO2 is the thing that's going to take your recovery rates from 4%, and you've got work going on right now in your own EERC up here that's looking at as much as 30, 40, and 50% recovery from oil that's being left in place today. It's the other miracle that's below the ground right now that's at your fingertips, but you've got to take it. You've got to seize it. It's CCUS. It's taking that CO2 that comes from your lignite and putting it to good use. I would suggest to people in the oil and gas industry, and maybe there's a gas guy in this auditorium here somewhere. I don't know. Maybe the guy snuck in or something. I don't know. But if anybody here is a gas guy and they're excited about the fact that the coal industry has taken a big hit because power production and the CO2 that comes from the power production from coal is going to be legislated because of that CO2, and we're in the money because we're a gas guy, I'm here to tell you those guys are also missing the point. There's no hall pass for CO2, not by the environmentalists, but I'm going to suggest you pivot on that argument as well. Every opportunity you have here to put transformative technology in place to capture that CO2 and put it to use in your oil fields up here is the only way you're going to be able to continue to grow. It's not an option. It's an absolute requirement that people embrace the concept of CCUS as a solution. You need the power, you need the oil production, and you need the environmental footprint and the environmental solution that carbon capture, utilization, and storage offers, because as that CO2 goes into the ground, the oil comes up, the CO2 stays in the formation safely and permanently for geologic time. It's an environmental solution that comes on the back of a business case that's as sound as the chair that you're sitting on right now. And unless we get ourselves out of the paradigm of talking about carbon capture and storage, carbon taxes, and what are they doing in Europe, and all the other gobbledygook that people want to talk about in terms of CO2 in the atmosphere and global warming and polar bears, you know what? I'm going to suggest it's time to stop. Think about it as a business case that's so absolutely fundamental. So now you say, okay, sounds great, but where's that going on? Where is this technology? What is this transformation we're talking about? Over the past 20 years, there's been a tremendous amount of development that's gone on in the world of gasification and in the world of carbon capture. Advanced technologies, let me just use the term clean coal technology, and no, it's not an oxymoron. Don't let anybody tell you it is. That's BS. Fleets in America in 1970 to 2000, in 30 years, we increased the amount of power in this country 200% from coal-fired generation. And during that same period of time, through the advent of clean coal technology and the development of many of the technologies you're all familiar with, we lowered the amount of NOx, SOx, mercury, and suspended materials by 90%. Increased by 200%, lowered the environment footprint 90%. That's clean coal technology. It exists. It has been existing. We have the cleanest fleet of coal in the world in this country because of that. And the next big thing is putting this CO2 in place. And so we've got gasification technology for pre-combustion. We've worked on post-combustion technologies. And in fact, we also have a whole series and suite of technologies through the Department of Energy and many of the universities and many of the developments that have been going on around the world in coal organizations, in China, in India, with oxycombustion as well. There are pathways to utilize CO2, but only if you think about it in terms of, I have a product and a market to serve, and that's enhanced oil recovery. Very recently, I understand, there have been technology providers that have come up to North Dakota and looked real hard at your lignite. And these same technology providers are also going to places like Poland, Romania, Germany. And I would suggest to you maybe even had a more favorable reception when they went there. You want to know why? Because in those countries, they're buying 90% of their natural gas from their best friend who runs the country of Russia, who happens to think fracking is a really bad idea, by the way. He's been fueling a lot of the environmental development work that's gone on in Europe, telling people how bad fracking is for them. But Putin's doing it for one reason. He wants these people on their knees buying his gas for the next 50 years. And so when you use the term sustainability to somebody in that region, it ought to mean the same as it does to us in our region. Sustainability is not an environmental term. Don't let it get hijacked from you by environmentalists. It means three things. It's security of the energy that I have access to, from friendly trading partners, from my own capabilities and my own technology development. I have energy security. I can count on it. The lights are going to stay on. Any of you ever worry about that in our country? I don't. I take it as a citizen. something that's guaranteed to me. I shouldn't, but I do. It's a very precious thing, and in our country we have it. Don't recognize that many people around the world are absolutely concerned about it every day. Is my future secure? Once you have security figured out and you're comfortable, the next thing you think about is what? How much does it cost? Affordability. I've got secure energy, now I'm going to complain about how much it costs. Because I don't have to worry about it, I know it's going to be there. And so I get to look at portfolios. I get to look at opportunities to divest that portfolio. Coal, gas, a little wind, some solar, this, that, and the other thing. It's a great place. It's a great place to be if you have that flexibility. But at the end of the day, when any of us begin to see our power bills double or triple, I'm going to tell you that it'll be on your radar screen. The EPA rules that Mike Nassy is going to tell you about are going to affect some states in this country by as much as 2x or 3x on their power bills. And these people don't even know it. The administration's not telling them. The EPA's certainly not telling them. But these people are sitting on top of something that's going to triple their power bills. That's obscene to me, because it doesn't offer any technology solution. It just offers sacrifice and pain. And who wants that? So, what happens on the third thing? I know it's secure. I know it's affordable. Now I get to think about the environment. I have a responsibility to think about the environment because it's important, and you should. And it's a three-legged stool, and you can't just blow off one for the other. But I'm going to suggest to you that when security and affordability and those needs are met, people begin to now think very seriously about that environmental responsibility that they have. We're in that place in this country. We're in a land of abundance. We're blessed with a bunch of natural resources and a huge portfolio of options that we have for our energy generation in this country. And we spend a lot of time talking about the environment in this country. And we probably should. As a matter of fact, I believe we have a global responsibility to think about it. Because for as much as we obsess about what we're going to do, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter in terms of CO2 and in terms of that environmental footprint for coal, because the story's going to be written in China and India, not in the United States. And so as leaders, as people in the world that have always been looked at to lead in technology, what does the rest of the world want from us? Not our Secretary of State going over and telling them what they should do and what their moral responsibility is for their people. They don't want a morality lesson from the Secretary of State. What they want is technology. They want solutions. They want the things that you're in a position here in North Dakota to be a global bellwether for in the development of the things that you can do with your lignite here and the kinds of facilities that can be built to convert the lignite, make the power, utilize the CO2, and transform the way the oil and gas industry is conducting their business. It's a complete value chain for all of us in the fossil community. It's not a wealth transfer between one or the other. It's absolutely a connected value chain. So, people here have coal mines and other people have power generation facilities, and I'm going to suggest that the real holy grail in North Dakota might in fact be the connection of your organization to people in the oil and gas community, so the realization of what's going to go on in EOR is not one guy waiting for the other guy to do something, and then I'll get a chance to buy a commodity from that guy at a discounted price once he finally makes the decision. And I use the word he inclusively. I should say he and she. But what I'm suggesting is this is a value chain of the entire community. And if in fact we get reduced to simply hanging on to what we think we know and the way it's been, fighting EPA rules with lobbyists and then complaining about it through lawsuits, that's way less than half a load. You got to come forth with a technology solution, and it's right here in front of you. It's carbon capture, utilization, and storage. It's gasifying or oxycombustioning or post-combustioning CO2, delivering it to those oil fields and creating something that's going to create sustainability for lignite for the next 50 years or longer, and for your Bakken miracle for the next 50 years. Certainly a whole lot better than what it looks like right now. Because the rest of the world looking at what's going on in the Bakken, and nobody's particularly impressed technically. Fugitive emissions, methane, lack of power, lack of infrastructure, an environmental footprint that's not particularly pretty, and people run down the road 10 miles and punch another hole in the ground because you know why? The oil's there and everybody knows it. That's too easy. It's also not productive. It's also far from realizing the dream that you can create for your next generation and the ones behind you. Because it isn't just about plundering natural resources, it's about maximizing their value. There are clean coal demonstration projects going on in this country right now. Yeah, I spent 2 years in the Obama administration and I survived. I went there because I believed there were things that needed to be done in coal. Desperately needed to be done. Secretary of Energy Chu asked me, if you're going to do one thing, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to put the U in CCS and I'm going to make it stay there. Because the rest of this country can't afford to keep talking about CCS. Because CCS, in my mind, is a passive-aggressive way for people that don't want to see coal to succeed to have it fail. It costs too much. You can't get a big enough carbon tax. I don't even understand cap and trade. Maybe somebody here does and they can explain it to me. I don't know what that does to take CO2 out of the atmosphere. But I can tell you that if you take it out of the atmosphere and utilize it in an oil field, you can make more oil tomorrow, sometimes as much as 3 or 4 barrels a ton. You can take your recovery rate from 4% to as much as 25 or 35%. You've got an EERC in this state right now that's done some preliminary test work, but hey, look, I'm not a shill for the EERC, but I would suggest they're probably desperately underfunded. They're running little pop gun tests here and there with a truck or two of CO2. You need to get serious about developing a footprint up here to understand what the potential is in your geologic regimes that you have. And once you understand that, you'll also then be able to step back and say, okay, I need 3 gigawatts of power. And I need to do it in 10 years, and there's probably 4 or 5 scenarios that you can concoct in your mind in terms of how many windmills, how many solar panels, how much renewable, how much do I want to sell to Minnesota or not? I mean, you got all kinds of options, right? But if one of those options isn't primarily driven by utilizing lignite, maybe as much as 2/3 of that 3 gigawatts, I'm going to suggest to you that all the other options cost your taxpayers more money. Their power bills are higher if you go that route. Your economic recovery for your state is lower. Nobody ever talks about that. It's like it's some environmental conversation. It's not. It's all about the future of your state, the revenue you can generate, the jobs you can generate, and the economic sustainability of the state. And I'm going to suggest to you, by utilizing lignite and CCUS, you're going to accomplish that. You need to get a demonstration project up here. You need to figure out how you can put something in the ground that is meaningful. It doesn't have to be a $5 billion project. It needs to be of a scale that's suitable to demonstrate the technology and gain confidence And then you need to be able to replicate that project. We made Model Ts in this country for a long, long time. And then guess what? People didn't want them anymore. Well, the auto industry had to retool. They had to come up with a new design. They needed to test drive it. Then they needed to start building it. And the first few that they built, yeah, they were a little expensive. But ultimately, we started cranking out Chevys and Fords and all of the things that we all drive because we're able to replicate on what we've built and what we've understood. I don't know anybody in this room that wants to do another $100,000 engineering study. To study something that probably, if you took the back of an envelope and a piece of paper and a pencil, you could get pretty close to yourself anyway. We don't need any more engineering studies. What we need is a project to get around. We know what we can do. Let's gasify some coal, let's capture some CO2, let's put it in a field, and let's celebrate it as an international event. Something just like this is going on right now in Mississippi. Now, they built a really big project, and it's really expensive. And I'm not going to go into that. You've probably all read about the Kemper facility. But what's going on down there is just a piece of what you can do up here. They're going to make power, and they're going to put it into a pipeline for enhanced oil recovery. But it's not enabling the oil and gas industry in the state of Mississippi near as much as it could up here in North Dakota. There's a roadmap out there. There's technology that exists. There's companies that have this technology. And so we get into these discussions about who's going to pay for it, who's going to go first, how do I work with somebody else? I don't know the answers to that. But it seems to me like everybody I've met in North Dakota pretty much gets along with each other. It's a very unique place in this country, actually. People seem to have a community spirit up here that's a little different than what I see in many places. I'll tell you, it doesn't exist on the East Coast at all. But you have that ability here, much like my home state in Ohio, where people can come together for the good, for the common good of everyone up here. And I believe it's not an option. I think it's a requirement. Sitting around waiting for somebody else to do something isn't going to get it done.